It is currently 27 minutes away from the top of the hour. My guest is a former minister in the Ministry of Finance. We are talking about the budget of 2016. We are talking about the issue of where we need to pull in, to rein in expenditure, which he sees paramount, particularly when your revenue base is dwindling. And the area of a 15% increase across super and diesel is said to be weaning off the population, as it were, from the subsidies. My guests say, how about if we stop doing this pussyfooting, moving gently, and walk straight in and say CNG is your replacement? Do I represent you well, sir? And please detail.
Absolutely, both in terms of context and passion. But my argument on the CNG issue is this. Many years ago, we started the conversion discussion, and it failed. It failed because we made a couple of mistakes. The first mistake we made is that the technology that we used for filling CNG units was slow. So basically, it upset the population in a real sense, because when you went for your refill, it took too long. Secondly, we didn't have enough infrastructure in place. We didn't have enough stations. So it created a bottleneck, and you had to go in a particular way. And thirdly, the technology at the time was such that it was cumbersome. It took up a lot of your space and those kind of issues. I think over time, given the fact that most countries recognized that the environment was a very important issue and the world was going there, they have made significant changes in both the technology and in so far as how that whole new technology will be delivered. So, for example, when I left office, we had a proposal that basically went as follows. We were going to put, I think, 36 new stations. We were going to basically put them on the basis of our understanding of where the transportation maximum areas were. We were going to create a product in which the filling time was superior to that of regular gasoline. So when you went to fill your cylinders, the time that you would take would be less time than if you were filling up your normal vehicle. We were also going to ensure that in some instances you have the choice between, to switch backward and forward. And really and truly, the only challenge that, and of course the other thing is that whereas at the time diesel was $1.50 per liter, this was going to be delivered at $1. All right. So then the only issue was, how do you make this transition so that you can get the benefit?
Hold on for me for a moment. So when you say so you could switch, you need the time to switch back and forth. You're looking at a hybrid.
Yes.
I see. Okay, please go.
Because in some instances, if your tank if your tank was empty and you were in Maracas, for example, and you didn't have a station in Maracas, then
go back to conventional.
Yeah, conventional. Because one of the things that we need to understand as we go forward, it is no longer this or that. It is this and that. Even as we look at electricity and we look at conversions and we look at those kind of issues, because the technology and the interconnectivity allows us to so do. And it therefore allows us to participate in the best of both worlds.
How practical and expensive is it, continuing in the conversion area, to now take vehicles that's on the road and equip them? How expensive, how practical is that?
So the last time I looked at it, and that must have been about 5 years ago. At that time, if we took the entire maxi taxi fleet and converted it, I think it was going to cost us $500 million. But almost immediately, the savings at about $70 would have been about 3.6. So it meant that you could have done a couple of things. You could have moved $3.6 billion worth of expenditure from the expenditure profile. But you could also have used the diesel to sell to, for example, the shipping industry and others that we currently use. Additionally, if we had gone forward with what some in the last administration called a, anyhow, let me not go here, but let me just say that. So if you took diesel, for example, and you put it through a process and you made it more valuable, then you can actually sell it on the international market. So you can, in fact, move the volumes that you currently use in your transportation subsector internally to a product that allows you to get foreign exchange externally, because that diesel product is required by other countries to move their power, in some instances, and their transportation subsectors, so that simply by changing the use of the product and providing our citizens with a different, lower cost alternative, we would have solved two problems. We would have solved the inflation problem that will necessarily go by changing the price, because once you change the price, it gets into the inflation transportation matrix, and then it gets to the final product, and the consumer has to pay for it. That cannot be refuted in any instance, because really and truly, it then depends on whether business people believe that they should take up the additional cost, and you know.
Resoundingly, the answer is no.
Well, I would have thought that everybody knew that, but maybe I don't know everything, and I don't. But the logic seems not to make sense. The fact is that you have to find a way to make it attractive for individuals. The other issue, of course. So on the one hand, I talk about this question of the maxi taxis and the transportation sector being converted.
$500 million as against $3 billion in savings.
I also think that, having said that you would now begin, therefore, to have what I call a CNG industry. The other decision that would have been made, of course, is that you have some 89 state companies. You have central government that basically require vehicles. You have national security that require vehicles. You have customs. I mean, every single ministry that you look at, there is a requirement for vehicles. Let's simply move all of that into CNG.
And you start the saving from there, even if
Then
that's the only first phase.
Not only that, but then you also create an industry.
Yes,
you create an industry in which you require people to repair vehicles, to service vehicles. And therefore, what would have been a loss in a set of industries can now become a gain in the other industries, because you've prepared individuals, and they simply have to go and get training in that area, and that shouldn't be difficult because it's more or less the same technology. So I'm saying to you that we, as a country, have an infrastructure, we have a base, we have knowledge, we have all of that. And all we need to do is to sit down and, kind of redirect it.
My guest is Conrad Enill. He is the former minister in the Ministry of Finance, talking about that side industries, for every action, there are other things that's going to happen. I will not touch on my pet project, which he disagrees with, is the question of if this is the right time for the rapid rail. But no, sir, I will not go there. I haven't read you.
No, I can deal with that. I mean, rapid rail is something I think that must come simply because if you look at the amount of people, it's a very simple. It's simple.
Yes,
if you look at the amount of people that actually goes through the bus terminus, how you call it?
Citygate.
It's about 200,000 people every day. Now, no amount of vehicles, no amount of maxi taxis to move that amount of people can happen with the road infrastructure that we have. So what we need to have is some kind of transportation mechanism that can move more than the maximum 25 people at a time through space. If you look, for example, at what happened with the introduction of the sea transport, the water taxis, basically they have a different capacity. And as a result of that, a lot of people are finding it more convenient to leave their vehicles in Port of Spain and basically take the water taxi. It comes in to Port of Spain. You spend less time, you have less stress, you have less confusion. It is the same principle.
And less strain on the roads and less repair costs and all of these
Absolutely.
things, yes.
And you know, when we look at what happens in developing societies or even societies that understand these issues, you can in fact have a rapid rail existing on the same road infrastructure that we have,
Yes.
and maintain both.
Yes.
So, I mean, the conversation about rapid rail or not rapid rail, to me,
Is not an issue.
is not an issue.
Is not an
It's
issue.
just a matter of timing it. But I do believe that before you get there, there are some kinds of things that you could do, because you're going to have to ensure that the current stock of maxi taxi business people that you have, who earn their living as a result of that, you have to understand how are you going to redeploy them.
Well, you have a number of arteries now that are underserved, and that's why I am hoping that they, when folks raise the argument about what happens to the maxi taxi drivers, I say, well, look at what happens when folks get off the main road. They have the same problem, so we increase, we increase, make the roads better, make it more workable for these maxi taxis to go in these areas.
But not only that, because one of the things that this government has identified is that there is neglect to a very large degree in rural communities.
Yes.
That also means that there is transportation infrastructure neglect. And therefore you can redirect a lot of the support that you have now to actually support business activity, to support some of the areas where specialized transportation is required, and I think it's doable.
And with infrastructural work, you're also creating more jobs as you go.
Absolutely.
And the thing, I see a lot of jobs being created by you having a rapid transport system, and at the various points where folks stop, you've got a number of things happening, from park and rides
But of
to...
course, yeah, because listen, if you think about it, what is it suggested? If you put a transit system on the
priority bus route.
on the priority bus route as an example, how many communities we have there? You know, and the linkages between the East-West corridor, South, Maracas, all of those. You need transportation to get people out there, because, I don't know if you travel down the Eastern Main Road or the priority, but it is sad.
I don't have a priority pass, but I have I've driven parallel to it and look at the movement.
Go talk to somebody to get a priority pass. But the thing about it is, it is sad in my view to see children, to see adults standing in the hot sun or the rain, and actually running up and down the road to try and see which vehicle they will get to. That is not acceptable.
I made it my business when the rain fell the last time to go down to Port of Spain, and it was heartbreaking.
Well, one of the other things I have said is that the state should have the national security infrastructure. Get some tractors with some, at carnival time we have how we transport pans. This big, and just have it available in Port of Spain, and immediately as soon as rain falls, just take the tractor and drive through, because it is not acceptable in my view to have women, children, trying to fight with the level of flood, and we have absolutely no hope no hope of moving them to safety. That is not acceptable.
The voice you're hearing this morning is that of Conrad Enill. We are talking about the budget. We are talking about some aspects of it. I want to go back a bit, Mr. Enill, to one area that we touched on, which is the question of sharing this weight of adjustment, sharing the burden of adjustments. And to be clear, property tax, it is going to be introduced. It's going to be there 2016. But for clarity, there's a question of if it is being reintroduced by the current Rowley administration, or was it suspended and rescheduled by the past administration to come back in force in 2016? What is your reading of that?
It was intended to come back in 2016 because the legislation, basically, my reading of the legislation is that the amendment for its cessation ended at 2015.
Right.
And therefore, in 2016, what the Minister of Finance had said is that it was going to return not as proper. But let me deal with that. One of the things that the population would find out very shortly is this. Historically, when we looked at the property, land and building taxes as it then was when I got into government in 2000, property taxes were being evaluated on 1938 valuations. When I took control of the valuation division of the Ministry of Finance, which was part of the revenue collection activity, one of the things we found is that the reason that the valuations were at 1938 levels and therefore somebody who had a house of $5 million would pay $38, was because we had no expertise in revaluing property.
Property, yes.
We took the steps at that point in time to train, and I remember the number, 24 persons with the authority to revalue properties.
A property reassessment board.
Reassessment person, yeah, because there's a skill that is required. And during the period since 2000, we had revaluations of properties done by a number, in a number of areas. When we got to 2008, I think it was, and we started the property tax conversation, there were some areas in Trinidad and Tobago where, in introducing the property tax that the administration was promoting, would have allowed them to have a reduction in their taxes. Because the taxes that they were paying on the basis of current valuation was higher than what was being proposed.
Okay.
So that they're in some places, I think San Fernando was one, I think Arima was another one, and I don't recall the third one. But as a result of introducing that method of property tax, compared with the current up-to-date market valuation of properties,
Which is way out of hand.
which is where it is today, would have caused these individuals to pay less.
Yes, yes.
So that the country was in a situation where some was paying a very high tax, others were still paying 1938. And the opposition at the time said that what it will do on the basis of the formula is that it will cause everybody to become poor and all of these kinds of issues, which is not the truth. Having said that, though, I think that when the Minister of Finance says that we are introducing the taxes at the same
2009 rate, yeah.
rate,
2009.
I think that the expectation that the population has and the actual experience will be different.
Yeah, because he's saying we are starting there. He's saying we're going to look at this after. We're going to start here, but we're going to look at this.
But there's another issue. You see, since 2000, the valuations have changed. And therefore, if the rate stays the same, but the valuations have changed, your cash requirement is going to change. And unless he says that we are going with the same dollar amount rather than the same rate, the computations are going to be different. So I think that he needs to either explain to the population that rate multiplied by a higher value is going to have you spend more on property tax, or he's going to say whatever it is you paid on the last occasion, simply bring the bill and pay that again. I think that's an issue that needs to be clarified. I don't know how that is going to be resolved.
It is 8 minutes away from the top of the hour. We are attempting to extract as much we can from diverse areas of the budget presentation from our guest, who was in the Ministry of Finance, who is clearly a very valuable source to get information from. I cannot go through this without referring to a conversation I had with our first guest, Senator Barrett, who was here. And we spoke in the area of agriculture. The food bill is unbelievably high. That is an unsustainable situation. So agriculture, what are your thoughts on diversification, considering that we have to get our farmers back to the land? We've got to start producing more. We've got to get agriculture back on the front burner, where it has decreased markedly, 15%, I believe, over the last 5 years.
Even as we talk about this, there are some other things that we need to talk about. Yesterday I was teaching a class and we had a conversation around diversification. And I basically asked 20 students to stand. And they stood. And then I had one student stood, and I asked the question, if Trinidad and Tobago has to diversify, and I'm making this comment in the context of agriculture. If Trinidad and Tobago, if this was the agricultural mix that we had, and 20 individuals in dollar terms was the equivalent of one, explain to me how you're going to get to the market and compete as this one as opposed to the 20. In other words, let's take a country like China or a country like Guyana or any of those countries. The minimum wage in Trinidad and Tobago as a hydrocarbon-based economy is $2 per person per hour. The minimum wage in China is 20 cents. The equivalent in some of the other jurisdictions that we are competing with is less than that. So it means that I can take a pool of 20 individuals in another territory, and the productive capacity of that 20 for Trinidad and Tobago to compete in some of those areas, that one individual will have to match that. How the devil is that possible? It is not. So what needs to happen, in my view, is that Trinidad and Tobago, as a society, need to sit down, and the leaders need to determine where do we have comparative advantages within the Caribbean for the problems that we have. If, for example, there's a comparative advantage in Guyana, and there might be, then why do we not support Guyana with some of our tax dollars so that Guyana could feed Trinidad and Tobago? Or, in the case of Grenada, we have marine assets, but we don't have an infrastructure in Trinidad and Tobago, in my view, that will support that. So why do we not start to use CARICOM as our space to create employment opportunities for our people by giving them things to do for us, for which we will have some control? My own view is that unless you sit down and decide where you have comparative strengths on the basis of their own economic cost structure, we are not going to be able to do this. We're trying to do this by ourselves. It will not give us the benefits that we think it will give us, because our cost structure, where we are today, doesn't allow us to compete and to be successful in some of those markets.
What is your take in the sense that did you get enough, a clear enough explanation as to where this money will be used that will in fact seriously impact on the crime situation we have here?
The first question that I have, and I really don't have the answer to this question, is that a fact? If you remove the NOC from the office of the Prime Minister and you put it into national security, and now you're showing it as a total package because you've reconfigured your ministries, can you really say that? Is it not that national security over the last 5 years would have gotten the biggest chunk? Except that when you're looking for national security, because the Prime Minister is head of the National Security Council, are there costs associated that went to national security? So the first issue, I think, is, as far as I'm concerned, that's not an issue. That's a non-issue. Where I have the issue, though, is that I do not feel that in modern Trinidad and Tobago, the entire focus should be on national security and national security alone. I think national security is one of those issues that we would deal with, we would fix over time, because it requires us to do certain things in terms of intelligence, in terms of strategies, in terms of understanding what is taking place. And I don't feel that we need, every time some investor looks at Trinidad and Tobago, the first thing that he sees is that we have such a problem here that we are putting all the resources in it. Because if I have to buy a helicopter or 2 helicopters or 3 helicopters, by definition, it's not a motor vehicle you're talking about. So that the cost that you see for infrastructure support does not necessarily reflect the nature of the problem. Yes, we have a problem. We all understand that. We all understand why as well. And in order to achieve that, you have to change the relationships. If the crime rate is 300 or the crime rate is 1, the police commissioner gets the same $40,000 or $50,000 that he makes.
But
unless you find a way to make sure that people benefit as a result of better results, as is the case in every other institution that looks at effective implementation.
I think the Police Commissioner makes a very good point too. It is not just enough to put the money here. There is a social component that you cannot go about thinking in terms of reducing crime without dealing with that disconnect.
Yeah, but that happens. Well, let me say it this way. To the extent that you need to do that, then the Prime Minister needs to reconfigure his ministries in such a way that within the leadership of the ministry, those issues are resolved. However, the definition of national security today and the leadership of national security will be based on the persons that he selects to lead that charge. If you put a retired military officer to deal with national security, then national security is going to be about enforcement and about defense. And therefore, if you are talking about understanding social interventions, then you need to put somebody there who is going to lead the conversation slightly differently.
Bring both elements into discussion, yes.
We therefore have to wait on the leader, the Prime Minister, to decide what he wishes to accomplish. And you understand that on the basis of the choices that he makes.
Conrad Enill has been my guest inside this hour. Before you leave, I cannot have you leave, sir, without giving me, and I'm going to put you on the spot here, give me a top 3 good things you see coming out of the budget and the bottom worst ideas. The best and the worst you see in the budget of 2016 as presented by the Minister of Finance.
I think that for the very first time, there's a conversation that it is not business as usual. I think that he has tried to not, at this point in time, remove the burden from the state and put it on individuals. I think it is very clear that some of the things that I think that he's also signaled that there's a requirement for transformation, and I think that's a good thing. The 3 bad things I find is that there's a conflict between his tone and what he wants to accomplish. You can't go basically demonizing those that you have to work with and expect that they will collaborate with you. I think that's an error of strategy.
You speak of the uppercuts that came together with the budget numbers delivery.
Yeah, I think one of the things in this society that we have to lead is a change in the way we deal with one another. And politics, in the form that we have interpreted it, has to change. It is no longer, in my view, win, lose. It has to be choice of prescriptions.
Which is precisely what I sought to extract from the Senator Barat when he was here. So we have to de-hustinize, and I'm coining that.
Yeah.
Take the hustings out of governance.
Yeah. And that's a function of the leadership. And if you have an opportunity to so do and you haven't done it and you haven't demonstrated it, then you are in fact not supporting what your Prime Minister has said. Your Prime Minister has said that what we need to do, and he has said that he himself has suffered as a result of persons talking collaboration but acting in a different way.
All right. Bad choice 1. Bad choice 2 is?
I think that we should not have changed the price of fuel. I think instead we should have accelerated the conversion issues and created a transforming type of environment insofar as moving forward is concerned.
You anticipating a big across-the-board impact of that 15%?
No. Yes. Okay. The answer is yes, because there are other things that will happen that will cause the cost to go up, and then people will be justified in basically saying that this is the reason for it. And of course, the third thing is that I didn't think he should have reduced VAT, not at this time, because I don't think that he understands. As far as I'm concerned, in reducing VAT, what he has basically done is that he has increased borrowings.
Yeah, you've gotten rid of another stream of revenue is what you're saying.
Not only that, you've gotten rid of another stream of revenue. You are going to have to increase the price of some of the commodities that previously had no VAT on it. And you're doing so at a time when the economic activities are basically being reduced. But more than that, to the extent that VAT is the kind of tax that it is, it's an ad valorem tax. It means that you do not have a mechanism to ensure that the benefit is passed on to the consumer. And I think that was error.
Well, I like the pluses we're coming out of here, which is not business as usual, change the way we do things. We must approach this in a different way. And I think I heard you saying that, in fact, it looks as though this is a fair approach at dealing with sharing the burden across the board. Did I interpret that correctly?
You did.
All right. I thank you very much. As always, former Minister of National in the Ministry of Finance and, of course, the Minister for Energy and Energy Industries in Trinidad and Tobago, Conrad Enill, also lecturer. Thank you so much. It was good to have you here this morning.
Thank you.